Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now. Washington State is going back to court with the Northwest Ice Processing Center. The state argues they should be able to inspect the facility, but the federally contracted detention center owners disagree. We'll unpack what's going on with the Washington State Standard's Goldenstein-Street in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Concerns are growing about how information from state agencies is getting out to the news media. A policy from Governor Bob Ferguson requires most press releases to be signed off by the governor's office before going out. Axios Seattle reports a public health alert on a measles case at SeaTac Airport was delayed an hour after the governor's office requested changes to the news release. Axios obtained emails through a public records request in which one state official called the policy painful and arduous and created a severe bottleneck. A spokesperson for Ferguson's office says the policy aims to increase collaboration across state agencies. King County is offering some older residents $80 worth of benefits to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. To qualify, you need to be 60 years or older and earn less than $2,400 a month. King County says the e-benefit cards can be used to buy produce from farmers markets and community-supported agriculture programs. Applications are due May 8th. And how would you guess Seattle ranks for bike commuting? A new report from Strava finds that Seattle ranks number 1 in the U.S. with more than 3.3 million miles. The Seattle Times reports the most popular segment is the Westlake Bikeway, followed by the Burke-Gilman Trail, and then 8th Avenue Northwest to the Fremont Bridge. City officials told the Times the Strava data will supplement its understanding of biking patterns in Seattle. We'll be back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
This morning, our office filed a motion in federal court to stop GEO Group and any private detention facility from blocking health and safety inspectors from accessing this facility and facilities across Washington state.
Earlier this week, Washington Attorney General Nick Brown and Governor Bob Ferguson held a press conference at the Northwest Ice Processing Center in Tacoma. The State Department of Health has been trying to gain access to it for inspection for years, but the private company that owns the detention center, the GEO Group, keeps turning them away. Ferguson and Brown are seeking a court order to let state inspectors inside the facility, and GEO Group is taking it to the Supreme Court. Here to untangle the legal web is Jake Goldenstein-Street. He's been following the story for the Washington State Standard. Thanks for taking the time, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Jake, let's start with a little context for listeners about the Northwest Ice Processing Center. Who is it for and who controls the facility?
Sure. So this is a roughly 1,600-bed facility in Tacoma. It's for mainly migrants detained either before they're released back into the United States or for deportation. It's obviously seen a lot of furor since the Trump administration retook office, concerns about quality of life in there, but the concerns go back no matter who the president was. It's run by the GEO Group, which is a Florida-based company. It's a for-profit facility run through a contract with the federal government. GEO runs many of these similar facilities across the country. They're one of the main private detention contractors for the federal government.
Okay, and one of the reasons we are talking is because the State Department of Health has been denied access to the facility. Who has had access to the Northwest Ice Processing Center? Who do they let in?
So it's not entirely a black box. You know, members of Congress get in there to visit with people. The State Department of Labor and Industries, under the same law that the state is trying to enforce, can get in there, but that's specific to inspecting the workplace, not for conditions for the detainees there. And so there's pretty limited oversight. And obviously, members of Congress can go in there, usually Democrats, and can raise a stink about the conditions, but they don't have any type of enforcement authority the way the State Department of Health would if they were able to inspect. But like you said, they've been turned away.
What kind of concerns are we talking about coming from inside the NWIPC that the state wants to investigate?
They really run the gamut. The state has received over 3,500 complaints since 2023. Those range from drinking water concerns that could be related to bad pipes in the facility, to disgusting food, sanitation concerns, issues with administering medication, and then they can also go up to sort of things that could be criminal, assaults by staff members on detainees there, those sorts of things. Lots of different concerns here. The state has no way to confirm the veracity of them at this point.
As a reporter, Jake, I get a lot of email about the Northwest Detention Center from people who are talking about hunger strikes to conditions on the inside, lots of allegations and concerns. What do you know about what is going on inside the detention center? Have you spoken to families?
Last year, just to give one example, I talked to the attorney for one man who had been held in the detention center who had a rare condition and didn't feel that the detention center was doing enough to care for him. And his family was worried that he was going to die inside the facility. Those are the sorts of concerns that you hear a lot from families, from attorneys bringing cases to try to get them out of there while their immigration proceedings go on. Those are really common concerns.
Does the State Department of Health have a legal right to inspect the facility?
Yeah, that's the question basically that this whole case over this 2023 state law that Democrats in the legislature passed. At its core, this is a case of state versus federal power. So by way of background, what we're talking about here is a 2023 state law that the state passed trying to give the State Department of Health inspection power to go in there unannounced and investigate complaints that they've gotten, the ones that we were just talking about. This law also sets a number of standards in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables, telecommunications services, psychiatric care, air conditioning and heating, but the state has no way to enforce those things if they can't see what the conditions are like in there. And so the arguments here revolve a lot around the supremacy clause to the U.S. Constitution, whether states can regulate federal detention facilities. KUOW Group was arguing that the state was trying to regulate their facility beyond what they do for their own state jails and prisons. And the lower court judge, when making the original decision a couple years ago, seemed sympathetic to that argument in invalidating the law. There's a lot of back and forth here. Lawmakers here in Olympia rewrote it a little bit. That lower court ruling eventually went to a federal appeals court. The Ninth Circuit last August ruled that the state should be able to inspect, basically saying that the state wasn't unduly regulating a federal facility. And so those are some of the legal questions that are still outstanding here.
And the most recent news is this week's injunction. So let's talk about that.
So in a press conference Tuesday outside the detention center, Attorney General Nick Brown, Governor Bob Ferguson announced that they were asking a judge to force KUOW's hand, basically, and be let in the facility.
The task now for KUOW Group is to prove us wrong. There's been 3,500 allegations, more coming all the time. The KUOW Group has largely said that those are false. The best way to prove that is to open it up. Yes. Give transparency.
This is now what they call a motion for a preliminary injunction. We'll probably have a hearing here. I don't think this is something that'll happen in the matter of days, more likely the matter of weeks. The Attorney General said he'd like to see it fairly quickly, but it's hard to say. KUOW will get a chance to respond in court.
What has KUOW done in response to these lawsuits?
They've fought them voraciously. In this case, they're trying to bring that appeals court decision from last year to the U.S. Supreme Court. They have about until mid-June to appeal that and said that they've been planning to, and that nothing should change, that the status quo should stay the same, that no inspections should happen until the Supreme Court can weigh in. They've taken a similar tact on a somewhat related case over pay for detainees in the facility that resulted in a multi-million-dollar verdict. They're now asking the Supreme Court to weigh in on that. They've fought these cases, and they brought the original lawsuit over this law. And then when it comes to the inspections, State Department of Health officials have tried 10 times since 2023, they say, to inspect the facility. Each time they go there and are turned away. Interestingly, in the past couple times since the appeals court ruling came down, they've talked to officials from the KUOW Group who are there. They've been told that inspectors need to go through the local ICE office in Seattle to get permission to inspect, despite KUOW operating and running this facility.
Jake, if the state does get the right to do the Department of Health inspections, how much power do you think Washington would even have to affect conditions inside? Because it's one thing to get inside. It's another thing to actually change what's going on inside if there's a problem.
The law from 2023 gives them enforcement authority, the ability to fine GEO Group if they don't meet the conditions that the state wants. Those are, in the thousands of dollars per violation, but they can't do anything about them unless they can inspect. And it's not a situation where the state's going to get in, they're going to see, horrible drinking water being administered, and they're immediately going to hand down a fine. They'll work with GEO to try to address those problems, fix them. If it continues to be a problem, despite being told numerous times that they need to be fixed, that's when you start fining.
Jake, if the court rules in the state's favor, will the Department of Health be able to enter the Northwest Detention Center?
That's sort of a concern that's hanging over this. We're in a situation right now where there's an appeals court ruling saying that this 2023 state law is valid, that allows the state to conduct site inspections, but they're not agreeing to them. And so I think that's still a concern out there, that even if you get this injunction, GEO and ICE still might not want to let inspectors in. I'll note that in my reporting on this, I reached out to GEO. They deferred comment to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE didn't respond.
Moving forward, what are you watching for before I let you go?
Sure. I think there's a couple of things with this facility that are unrelated to this case that are definitely worth watching. GEO recently appeared to sign a new contract extension with Immigration and Customs Enforcement to continue running the facility. GEO makes tens of millions of dollars running this facility per year. And then the other thing to watch is kind of how detention numbers are changing there. And in a recent site visit by a member of Congress, it was reported that there were less than 1,000 people in the facility, which was a big change from the height of the immigration crackdown late last year, when you could see upwards of 1,200 people in there. At least that's what's been reported. But that recent contract did appear to up the capacity of the facility above 1,600. And so it's interesting to see how it's developing. GEO's run this detention center since 2005. It's gotten loads of attention, concerns about mistreatment, abuse, other allegations inside. It's just getting more attention now, given President Trump is in office. But I think another thing to note is that in this litigation that we're here to talk about, the state law from Washington was also opposed by the Biden administration's Department of Justice. This is not specific to President Trump wanting to take this fight.
Important context. Washington State Standard reporter Jake Goldenstein-Street, really appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to our generous donors for your financial support. It really makes a difference. Take a moment to rate the show or share it with a friend. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.